Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll wait just a second as people filter in to the webinar. But again, thank you so much for joining. We're so excited to have you all here today to discuss the new 100K Innovation Fund grant opportunity between the U.S. and Brazil. And we'll wait just a moment for people to filter in. Thank you. Great. All right. So again, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar about tips and strategies for writing your 100K proposal for the 2021 U.S. Brazil Innovation Fund grant competition. My name is Laura Cosette, and I am the Senior Program Officer of the 100,000 Strong in the Americas Innovation Fund here at Partners of the Americas. And I'm very happy that you are all joining us here today. We would like to start with just a couple of logistical notes. We do have a live translation available from English to Portuguese or Portuguese to English. You can access this by clicking the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. This will be available throughout the duration of the webinar. We also have the slides for the main presentation, the presentation that I will be presenting, available in Portuguese online at our website, 100kstrongamericas.org/webinars. And we will have the recording of this webinar as well as the materials available the week of November 29th. This is taking a little bit longer than normal because of the Thanksgiving holiday break coming up next week here in the United States. So we do thank you for your patience. And so we are recording this, and all of the materials will be made available to you, all of the PowerPoints as well. And this will be sent directly to you as well as posted on our website. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Maggie Hug from the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, who will speak to us about the general idea of the Innovation Fund. We will then pass on to Rita Moriconi from Education USA, as well as Gustavo Jovale Diaz-Rosa from Senai. And I will then go over the how to apply competition eligibility requirements, as well as tips and strategies for applying. We're also joined today by Dr. Jandro Abbott from the Catholic University of America and Dr. Matthew Flynn from Georgia Southern University, who are 100K grant recipients, and they'll be able to speak to us directly from their experience of implementing and writing a 100K grant. At the end, we will have a question and answer, but we do want to remind you that you can submit questions at any point throughout the webinar, and we will be answering those live as well throughout the webinar through the Q&A chat. And with that, I'll pass it off to Maggie Hug to speak a little bit about the 100K Innovation Fund. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you, obrigada, Laura, and Partners of the Americas for getting us together today through this webinar, through this virtual conversation. We would love to be with everybody in one place in Brazil or in the United States. So we're grateful for the virtual platforms that bring us together. And we also recognize that these are still interesting, challenging times due to the ongoing realities and challenges of the pandemic. We want to recognize all of you who work in higher education, whether you work in Brazil or the United States. What you're doing every day is so important for your students, for your faculty, to continue with their work. And the purpose of today, this discussion with all of us gathered here today, is to give you a tool in your toolbox, the 100,000 Strong in the Americas, or as we say, 100K Innovation Fund grants. We want you to know about this tool. We want you to know about how you can take advantage of it. This, as a lot of you know, you may know or may not know, the 100,000 Strong in the Americas Innovation Fund is a joint effort between the Department of State, where I am based in DC, the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, WHA, and Partners of the Americas. And in this case, with our incredible and wonderful partners at SENAI. In a few minutes, you'll hear from Gustavo, who's in Brasilia. And SENAI is a very important partner in this effort to provide you with tools to build partnerships between U.S. and Brazilian institutions so that your students and faculty can have access to both virtual and in-person exchanges. These Innovation Fund grants provide you with an opportunity to think about the work you do on your campuses, what you want to do, and what kind of innovative new program models you could come up with in teams. And you'll hear about this from everybody in just a second. I also want to say a huge obrigada to my colleague Rita Maraconi from Education USA. She comes after me. Rita and her whole team throughout Brazil have been working very hard to help U.S. institutions partner with Brazilian institutions to take advantage of this Innovation Fund grant competition. And also my colleague, Leonardo Nardon from the U.S. Embassy in Brasilia. This is a big team effort. Leonardo and his team are here also to support all of you. We want you to be able to connect, to collaborate, and to create new programs that can lead to, that will give your students and faculty and a diversity of students the opportunity to participate in a regional exchange program that they might not ever have access to if it were not for your leadership to think about how you can take advantage of this 100,000 Strong Innovation Fund, the 100K grants. Please do use the chat box, as Laura said, for comments, for connecting, and also for questions. We will get through the questions as we go along. And you are very lucky because later in a few minutes, you'll also hear from two of our 100K ambassadors, Dr. Jandro Abbott from the Catholic University of America, and also Dr. Matt Flynn from Georgia Southern University. They are the 100K ambassadors who have made 100K programs work between US and Brazil in previous competitions, convocatorias. So we encourage you to listen to all of their tips and strategies and what they learned throughout this process. So we just want to encourage all of you to think creatively, to think broadly. These are grants that would be that if your teams are selected, you would be beginning in the fall, the winter fall of this year, 2022. So by then, hopefully in-person travel will be a little different. And as we know, the virtual platforms will continue to drive so much of what we're doing in the higher education communities in Brazil and in the United States. So with that, I just want to turn it over to Rita. I want to encourage all of you to listen and to enjoy Rita and Gustavo, and then our colleagues from the 100K partnerships. Seguimos adelante. Over to you, Rita.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Rita Morricone. I'm the Regional Education Advising Coordinator for Education USA offices in the Southern Cone, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Paraguay, Uruguay, and I'm based in Brazil. We have 42 Education USA offices in Brazil. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see a little bit of the Education USA offices. Let me just really quick get the presentation going. Yay, there you go. So I just want to really briefly talk to you about how Education USA can help you, how Education USA can bring US universities, Brazilian universities, and also with the help of SENAI all together for fantastic projects, so that more Brazilian and US partnerships are established. So briefly, we are the U.S. Department of State Global Network. In Brazil, we have 42 centers My goal is to get every single state in Brazil with a little dot with one advising office. I'm almost there. And I just thought of giving you the latest. We're commemorating International Education Week this week. Education USA has more than 27 webinars, and things going on in Brazil. And these are the stats from Open Doors of Brazilian students studying in the United States and U.S. students coming to Brazil. And as you can see, the latest numbers reflect the pandemic. But the good news is that Brazil went actually from number 9th in the world to number 8th as the biggest sender of international students to the United States. So obviously the pandemic affected other countries more than Brazil. And on the U.S. study abroad, these are students coming to Brazil. This kind of partnerships will help bring more U.S. students to Brazil. And that is what we are hoping for. There's a U.S. joint statement of principles in support of international education from Secretary of State, Secretary of Education, and we're all commemorating that during the International Education Week, week that we call it a month really in November. So talking a little bit about the Innovation Fund grants to Brazil. And now, first, be very happy because that means it's only Brazil. You don't have to compete with any other country. We love that. And then I just wanted to share with you some of the Education USA initiatives. And now, so for instance, if you are at a U.S. university and you send me a message, and my emails are morricone@educationusa.org. I'm going to ask Maggie or Laura to put it on the chat. All you have to say is, hey, I would like to reach out like Georgia State did, for somebody in public health. I pair them up with the Federal University of Minas Gerais, who happens to have an Education USA office. Today, here present, I just saw many of our colleagues and friends, Cristina Husi from the State University of Rio de Janeiro. She's a chemical engineer. She wants to partner. She's also the head of international office. Livia Reis from Federal Fluminense is here too. And even Marcio, I think from the president of FAUBAI, the Brazilian NASA network, right? So as you're talking to each other, you can even use the chat and say, oh, I'm interested in this project or that project to find each other. We also paired up USF, University of South Florida, sociology with, UFMG as well. Our host institution for Education USA in the South, the State University of Santa Catarina, has been paired off with human rights and public policy, and Universidade de Caxias do Sul, and thank you, Gustavo, for helping me there with Senai as well, is pairing up with Delta State University on technology development and women in STEM. So that's how you can use Education USA. We introduce you, we help you, we give examples of past proposals. And I just want to show you this essay writing resource center at the educationusa.org.br. You actually have, structured videos on how to write an essay in English, and then that can be used for proposals as well. So feel free to reach out to this very free Canvas course for Education USA. We're not doing questions and answers right now, so I'm just going to pass on back to Laura and Maggie. Thank you so much. A pleasure being here with you all.
Thank you so much, Rita. That's such good and valuable information for everybody who's interested in applying for this this competition. I will now pass it to Gustavo from Senai.
Thank you, Laura. I do my speech in Portuguese. If you want to swap to interpretation channel, I'd be glad. Então, queria primeiro agradecer a presença de todo mundo. Isso engrandece ainda mais o trabalho que nós temos feito junto com a Partners, com o Departamento de Estado, a Embaixada dos Estados Unidos aqui em Brasília. Bem, apresentar um pouco do quem é o Senai, tá? Por que essa parceria com a Partners, o que nos motiva a ter esse tipo de parceria, de investir nossos recursos para que isso aconteça. O Senai é reconhecidamente uma instituição no Brasil, já de 79 anos, em janeiro agora completamos nossos 80 anos de existência. A sua missão principal, desde a criação, é a formação profissional para a indústria, para o setor secundário da economia, e temos uma média de 3 milhões, aproximadamente 3 milhões de estudantes, de trabalhadores capacitados em 28 áreas tecnológicas por ano no Brasil. Tá? Isso vai de cursos para o primeiro emprego, cursos básicos iniciais de aprendizagem, até cursos de pós-graduação tecnológica em nível de mestrado, doutorado. Temos uma rede de mais de 800 escolas espalhado por todo o território brasileiro. Isso possibilita todo tipo de trabalhador cursar algum curso, ter alguma profissão, estar capacitado para o mercado de trabalho. Tá? Hoje, depois da pandemia, com esse impulsionador, além das escolas, a nossa estrutura de educação à distância, de educação virtual, tem crescido também de forma exponencial. Nos últimos 7, 8 anos, fomos desafiados pela indústria a criar uma nova rede de institutos voltados para a inovação tecnológica. Isso é uma demanda das grandes indústrias, pequenas e médias indústrias no Brasil. Tá? Nesse sentido, nós desenvolvemos e criamos, do zero, 26 novos institutos de inovação. Esses institutos são focados em pesquisa aplicada, em desenvolvimento, em criação de novos produtos, de novos processos industriais. É um desafio atualizado do Senai, que se soma à formação profissional, à educação tecnológica. Hoje nós temos já implantados, num espaço de 5, 6 anos, conseguimos implantar 26 institutos, estão todos eles totalmente operacionais, funcionando e desenvolvendo mais de 3.000 projetos ao longo desses últimos 5 anos. São tecnologias de ponta e, por termos essa expectativa e essa ambição de sempre trabalhar com o estado da arte nessas tecnologias, precisamos de parceiros. Tá? Temos que estar aberto ao que tem de mais moderno, de que mais avançado no mundo, e manter o nosso índice, manter e aumentar nosso índice de competitividade e produtividade dentro da indústria brasileira. Tá? Nesse sentido, ter parceiros internacionais é de extrema importância para o Senai. E isso nos impulsiona, nos motiva a buscar parceiros de extrema importância, como tem sido o Departamento de Estado, partners, o programa 100,000 Strong, parceiros como a Embaixada, U.S Education, são fundamentais para que isso funcione para a gente. E Estados Unidos não poderia ficar de fora desse jogo. Um país extremamente importante para o desenvolvimento de inovação e tecnologia. Tá? Escolhemos também, dentro de várias ferramentas, essas chamadas, os editais, no sentido de proporcionar a troca de experiência, o intercâmbio de pessoas e de conhecimento. Aparentemente pode ser algo pequeno para a dimensão da nossa ambição, mas com essa iniciativa que novas oportunidades vão aparecer, novos projetos, projetos mais desafiadores que vão instigar tanto os nossos cientistas, nossos especialistas, quanto dos nossos parceiros que farão parte dessa grande rede de tecnologia e inovação. Esse ano, nós ampliamos, já nessa segunda edição, não somente a participação dos institutos de inovação do Senai, mas também as faculdades, as escolas de ensino superior do Senai. Com isso, nós triplicamos a possibilidade de parcerias com as universidades americanas e também parcerias com as universidades brasileiras que, junto com o Senai, podem aplicar, podem apresentar propostas para o desenvolvimento desses projetos de intercâmbio. Por fim, eu convido a todas as instituições brasileiras e americanas para que se juntem a esse esforço, façam contato com o Senai, identificando, está na tela nosso e-mail, a gente criou um e-mail dedicado para auxiliar vocês a fazer essas pontes entre as universidades americanas e a rede de institutos e faculdades do Senai, bem como também os nossos parceiros aqui no Brasil. Agradeço de novo, Meg, a oportunidade, devolvo a palavra aí para vocês. E fico aqui à disposição. Obrigado.
Obrigada, Gustavo. Thank you so much for that presentation and for helping people understand how they can connect with Sinai institutions. And with that, we'll pass to the logistics of applying for an innovation fund, as well as going over some tips and strategies for applying. The first step is to join the Innovation Network. Registration is free. And by doing this, you'll be able to connect with our network of other higher education institutions across the Americas, as well as receive our newsletter and updates about competitions, our conferences that we'll be speaking at, webinars, and more. You can do this on our website at the Join the Innovation Network tab. To apply for one of our grant competitions, the entire application process is online, available again on our website under the Grants tab. This competition has been generously supported by Brazil's National Service of Industrial Training, SENAI, as well as the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. The application deadline is March 28th of 2022. And to learn more about this competition, please visit our website, 100kstrongamericas.org/grants to read more about the RFP. We will be going over just a few details. The intent of this competition is to give 6 Innovation Fund grants of $34,250 US. This is, of course, dependent on the review process. For this competition, the only eligible countries are Brazil and the United States. For this particular competition, no other institutions in other countries are eligible to apply. The required partnership is 1 US HEI with 1 Sinai Innovation Institute or higher education school. And our recommended partnership is 1 US HEI, at least 1 US HEI, at least 1 Sinai Innovation Institute or higher education school, and another Brazilian institution. And again, we'll be going over this very quickly today, but you can see full details on these requirements in the RFP, the request for proposals, as well as in our previous webinar, should you have more questions. These are the eligible thematic areas for this competition. As you can see, it's a pretty extensive list. We're very excited about that. If you're not sure if your proposed program falls under one of these categories, we do invite you to think creatively of how it could apply to one of these. And as long as you're able to provide justification for how it connects back to the RFP, then we are more than happy to consider your application. And the RFP, the request for proposal, contains even more detailed information on the eligible thematic areas. These are the different components that are necessary to submit at the time of submission of your application, and we'll be going over the information highlighted in orange in much more detail. Again, you can find all of this information online at any time. Now we'll be going over the evaluation criteria and proposal review criteria for an Innovation Fund grant. The technical proposal makes up 80% of the evaluation criteria, while the cost proposal makes up 20%. And the supporting documents, while not directly evaluated, are considered in the technical proposal and are necessary components. Please note that all the application materials, including the supporting documents, must be submitted in English. We'll now go over each one of these components in detail. The first section of the proposal, which makes up 40% of the evaluation criteria, is the executive summary and the program description. And here what we're looking for is clear and concise program goals and objectives. We're looking for the student learning goals, as well as a description of the student activities and the student timeline. Why is this program necessary? Provide that explanation and justification. We also need you to define the number of intended student participants, and it is necessary that students receive credit from their home institution for any 100,000 Strong in the Americas Innovation Fund program. So do be sure to specify what that will look like and how they will receive credits. A good rule of thumb we have is that reviewers shouldn't be left with any questions about the design or purpose of your proposal once they finish reading this section. So the main keys are be clear, concise, and specific. And again, we'll be going through this information rather quickly today, but we will be sending you these slides, and we have even more detailed information on our website available at any time. The next section is the sustainability plan, which makes up 15% of the evaluation criteria. And here we're looking for how will your program be able to continue after the initial year of 100K funding. 100K grants provide funding for only 1 year, and this is basically to serve as seed funding. And so we're looking for how will you be able to continue the program after this 1 year. We're looking for concrete plans and actions, looking for any plans to secure any financial commitments, either from your institution, your partner institution, community partners, etc. And how will you ensure support from your institution after the initial year of funding. Next is the institutional capacity challenges and opportunities for growth section, which makes up 15%. So here we're looking for you to demonstrate the capacity of your institution and your partner institution to administer the study abroad program. But we're also looking for you to highlight the challenges that currently exist, and of course, your plans to overcome or address these challenges. And lastly, any opportunities that could arise from these challenges and from this grant opportunity should you be awarded the grants. And here it is required to submit a letter of support, or letters of support from your institution and your partnering institution and any other organizations that are involved, as well as the resumes of the primary investigators. So again, you want to make sure that you're addressing all three components for all of the involved institutions. Strong letters of support are really important. The higher up you can go on the chain of command, the better. We'd like to see, basically we're looking for that institutional commitment to the grant. Make sure that they're provided in English. And yeah, the most important things are also to do it for your institution as well as your partner institutions. We often see this addressed only for the prime applicant. And the reason that we require all the materials to be submitted in English is that not all of our proposal reviewers speak Spanish or Portuguese. So unfortunately, if they can't read it, then they aren't able to evaluate it. Next is the monitoring and evaluation plan. And for this, we actually do provide a template. So our biggest recommendation here is probably to use that template. It outlines exactly what we're looking for, exactly what we need from you in this section. But here we're looking for the SMART goals and objectives. The what are your target goals? What will be the benchmarks? How will you measure them? When will you measure them? Will they be baseline, throughout, post-award? And who will be responsible for collecting the data? We do recommend doing a bit of research on this, as well as looking at the sample proposal that we have available online. And can't stress enough to be sure to use our templates. This helps the evaluators understand, and it helps demonstrate that you will be able to, that you have a solid plan for monitoring your program. Next is the budget summary, which makes up 15% of the evaluation. And here we're looking for overall clarity. And we want to point out that here we also have a budget summary template. This is an Excel spreadsheet that outlines exactly how this section should be completed. You want to make sure the calculations are correct, that they're in US dollars, and that they're as specific as possible. We also here are evaluating your indirect costs, your proposed indirect cost. And this is the administrative costs. Note that the maximum allowable is 20% of the grant, but we do recommend to keep this cost as low as possible. We do understand that different institutions have different capacity and different requirements. So if you aren't able to keep the indirect cost at or below 20%, we do recommend that you provide justification for that in your proposal, and that is of course taken into consideration. Next is the cost share, and we recommend at least a 1-to-1 match. So for this competition, that would be for $34,250 contributed by your institution and your partner institution and any other outside resources. However, we do prefer and typically end up awarding grants to institutions that propose a 1.5 or higher to 1 ratio for cost share. And there's many different ways to consider cost share and get creative about cost share. But of course, we, again, do understand that different institutions have different capacity, have different resources available to them. And this is taken into consideration in the evaluation process. Lastly is the budget narrative, which makes up 5%. And this is basically the written explanation and justification of the items in your budget summary. So we're looking for how did you calculate the cost estimates? And we're looking for the specifics and justification for why you included certain costs. For example, if you include a cost that might not make that much sense or that might not seem that reasonable, whatever it may be, here we'd be looking for justification for that. We're also looking for congruency throughout your proposal. So basically, does anything show up in the budget that didn't show up in the technical proposal or vice versa? So make sure that that all lines up. We have more information on our website about what costs are allowable. Again, we won't go over that in great detail today, but we do have a lot of information about that available on our website, and we're also always available to answer questions via email and via our website. So these are the different proposal elements. They are all, although weighted in different ways, we do encourage you to consider them all equally important. They are all considered in the overall evaluation. And if you need any more help, we can't stress enough to use our provided templates. We have an M&E plan template as well as the budget summary template. We also have 2 proposal samples available. We have a complete proposal and we have a budget narrative sample available on our website at the app format tab. We have the links here to our grant FAQs, the competition RFP, and the proposal format and design guidelines has endless information on how to design and write your proposal. Just a reminder, please make sure to submit everything in English, as I already mentioned earlier. And don't wait, you can actually begin your proposal even today. So we do recommend that you go in, create your profile, and start working on your application as soon as possible to make sure that you have all the necessary components and make sure you have time to ask us any questions should you have them. I understand I went through all that information very quickly. So if you do have questions, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A chat box, and myself and my colleagues will be available to answer any of those questions. With that, I will pass it off to my colleague, Dr. Jandro Abet from Catholic University of America, who has implemented a 100K grant project and is able to share with us some really incredible insight into designing and implementing a 100K Innovation Fund grant.
Thank you, Laura. Good afternoon, everybody. My pleasure to be here with you guys. Un prazer estar com vocês. Eu vou falar pouquinho aqui sobre meu projeto. I'm going to speak a little bit about our project. This was a project that we wrote in 2019. Because of COVID, it's still ongoing. So let me give you a few details about the technical project itself and about our research. We basically work with carbon nanotube fibers that we want to integrate in structures. Those could be aerospace, naval structures. It could be pipelines, different types of structures. And the idea is to basically use a carbon nanotube fiber as a piezo-resistive sensor. So as the fiber is expanded or contracted, the resistance changes. So we're going to use that fiber as a sensor. For this particular project, we focus on strain measurements. So using strain gauges and other type of measurements for monitoring structures. So I don't want to bore you too much with the details, but the carbon nanotube fiber is like our hair. So it's about 30 microns in diameter. It's a very delicate type of structure, but it's also very sensitive for measurements. So you can actually use it as an independent sensor, or you can also include it in structures like polymers, composites, metals. So we actually started working on this project with the professor, with some colleagues in USP in Sao Paulo. So basically what you can actually see, there is a strain gauge. It has a lot of nanotube fibers, and they're actually mounted on a backing material, like a polymeric material. And then you bond that into a structure. That could be a plane, it could be a bridge. And then you basically monitor the deformation of the structure. So if something goes wrong with the structure, you can actually monitor that in real time. And we actually did a lot of work in USP and ITA on this project as well, prior to this project. So I don't want to bore you too much with the details, but let me just, because that's what Laura asked me to speak about our experience. Before we wrote the proposal, and that's what I wanted to share with all of you, all of you here in the US and in Brazil, we basically, I had the experience of working with the colleagues in Brazil. First, I worked on a Fulbright project in 2014 and 2015. So that allowed me to build connections with some good schools in Brazil, USP Sao Paulo, USP Sao Carlos, ITA, okay? And I think that was a very important component. And for sure, we had projects here funded in the US as well by NASA, Air Force, and different type of agencies. Not significant amount of money, but enough to provide support for the students, publish their work, and basically develop these sensors. On top of that, I'm more of an how can I say, more applied type of research, individual researcher. So we wanted to actually build those things. And so we built, when I was in Sao Paulo, we built collaborations with IPT, that's Instituto de Pesquisas Tecnológicas, both in Sao Paulo and in San Jose dos Campos. Those are a little bit different from SENAI, that is a more of a federal institution. IPT is a state institution based in Sao Paulo. So I think that was important for me. Another very important thing for us is that we had the Ciencias Sem Fronteiras, the Brazil Scientific Mobility Program, which started in we had the students here at CUA in Washington, DC in 2012, 2013, and on to 2014. So that actually allowed us to build a lot of collaborations, get to know the students. They came from all over the Brazil. Like Rita was mentioning, I mean, they came from all different states, not only from the South, from Northeast, everywhere. So I think that was really important for us. That's more on the professional side I wanted to share with you. On the personal side, and this is my take, not everybody may agree with me, but I think if you go to Brazil, especially for the people in the US, I think it's very important to speak the language. For me, it was very nice to work with my colleagues, who most of them speak English, of course, but to work with all the technicians, the people in the machine shop, the secretaries, I think it was really great for me to communicate with them on a daily basis and speak the language and do that kind of cultural interchange communication. I think it's very important to get things done. So I really enjoyed that very much. And in addition to that, I have visited Brazil prior to meet with some of the colleagues. I also, went with my dean and some other colleagues just to, expand the collaborations as well. So we were building a network prior to the projects as well. And again, I don't want to bore you, with many stories, but I grew up in Uruguay, so it's a neighboring country to Brazil. Spoke Spanish when I was growing up, but my parents used to go and visit Brazil, so now I stay, studying engineering, at home. So I, always look forward to the opportunity of, working in the country, on a technical basis. So that was pre-proposal experience. In terms of the proposal itself, what we want is to put a strong team together. I'm more on materials, mechanics type of individual sensor. So I wanted to team up with people who had complementary expertise. So those are people like, for example, Professor Seabra in USP Sao Paulo, who's very good on the electrical stuff, microelectronics. And we team up with Senai Manaus that has a lot of expertise on microelectronics. So that was I felt at the time was a very strong, very complementary team. And certainly very important for me as an academician, as a researcher, to put a team of students together as well. So students who, will be based in the US and they could actually go to Brazil and work in Brazil and vice versa. And we were able to actually do that at the beginning before COVID in 2020. So my students actually work at USP Sao Paulo and they did great. And I think, we didn't get the students from Brazil coming, but hopefully once we restore the traveling, the students can come back here and our students can go back to Brazil. In terms of the topics, we wanted to do something that could actually be commercialized and we could actually license in both countries. I think that was very important to me, especially on the strain gauges. It's not a new technology, but it's a technology that could be improved. I think we could have actually better sensors, a little bit, more powerful, more robust. So I wanted to work on that topic like that. And in terms of the proposal itself, we wanted to have a strong narrative, with clear objectives, very well put together, and then a clear plan as well. When you work in another country, sometimes the logistics is a little bit difficult, but we wanted to put a strong team together with clear communications, clearly delineated tasks, and who would do what. I think that was very important to me. And in terms of broader impact, like the National Science Foundation does in the US, I think it's very important for international programs, projects as well, to have a strong educational component, good opportunities for our students, for the students in Brazil to come here as well, and then publish. We publish a lot of papers. I think that's very important. At the end of the day, the work has to be published. We have to, it has to be peer review published. So that was a very important component as well. And on top of that, if we can actually, have, IP, basically patent the, commercialize those products, I think that would be fantastic as well. We haven't done that yet, but I think that's a very important component that I want to get that done. I don't want to bore you. This is I basically pasted the table of contents of my proposal, and I'm certainly available to answer any questions, via the chat or via. I'm very good with email, so if you guys email me, I'm very glad to chat with you and share my experience about the proposal and about the project itself as well. So that's my contact information there. Thank you, Laura, and everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Abbott. That's so useful. And especially since you worked with the Senai institution, you're able to offer especially useful insight. And with that, I will pass it off to Dr. Matthew Flynn from Georgia Southern University, who also has experience working with Brazilian HEIs in implementing a 100K grant.
Everyone, thank you for this opportunity. Oi a todos. Vou falar em inglês, mas eu falo português também. I'm going to speak in English, but we have the translator here online, so just to keep it short, but I can always respond in Portuguese too. Just to reiterate maybe what some things that Dr. Hunter Abbott mentioned, I think was beneficial for our project was, number one, having the pre-established connections in Brazil. I had spent several years in Brazil, worked as a journalist there, had done field research there. I'm actually a sociologist by training, but then I teamed up for this effort with a colleague of mine here at Georgia Southern, who's Brazilian, and he's in the chemistry department, who is from Brasilia and did his, had gone to school at UNB, at the University of Brasilia. And so he maintained contacts there. And so we decided to do, based on his contacts at that university, along with my contacts, to do sort of a very interdisciplinary study called sustainable technologies. And his specialty is in organic plastics, using the Amazon in sustainable ways. And then I could bring in a little bit more sort of on the policy side, and we could capture a larger group of students to take from the United States to Brazil. And then from Brazil, we end up taking more students who are focused on chemistry and using the latest machinery and techniques that he has in his lab here at Georgia Southern. So number one was, hey, we already had a lot of extensive experience in Brazil. We had a lot of contacts. And even though most of my contacts and work had been in Southeast Brazil, in the Sudeste, in Sao Paulo, Rio, we ended up going to Brasilia based on his contacts there at the University of Brasilia. So we were able to establish that and put together, I think it's somewhat a unique proposal, being interdisciplinary, but focused on technology, innovation, and sustainability. So it would target a lot of students and bring in a lot of different elements. So even those students who just focus on chemistry would be exposed to different aspects of society, of politics going down in Brazil. And those who end up just focusing on political science or sociology or other types of areas would then be exposed to some of the hard sciences in Brazil. So that, I think, was made up sort of a unique project that we did and how we combine this. And then in terms of the proposal itself, I think what was really key is not obviously getting the support of University of Brasilia, but also, I could be wrong, but I think this is what the reviewers liked, was a lot of sort of external support that we could get to sort of boost up. Hey, we maxed out how much money we could get from 100,000 in the Americas, the $25,000. But then we could say, hey, we brought in a lot of different money from scholarships from the Kiwanis Club here in town, from Rotary, to help fund the project. And even more importantly is that we could tap into a lot of sort of soft funds or soft monies that the university could provide. I think the main one was in the form of graduate assistants who could help us develop this project, who could do all different types of research related to the project. And we could include that in terms of our project proposal. And because, graduate assistants, the university is already paying them, we're just grabbing some of their time, some of their hours. We could say, hey, all these, the contributions from these graduate assistants, and the university is already paying for their stipend and their tuition, we could add that to our proposal and make it look even stronger. And then on the other end, we could get contributions from University of Brasilia by they donated space for our students to stay at dormitories. And so we could list that as a number of different types of in-kind support that has a money value to it. And that way make I think a more sort of bang for your buck type of impact in terms of the project proposal, in terms of the budget, showing that although we're only asking for this amount of money, we're going to be using X amount of funds way above than what we're getting based on all these different contributions from the universities themselves and from external actors. Now, one thing is, as Dr. Handro mentioned, you got to be very flexible going down to Brazil and other places. And we were always wondering, will these dormitories come through? Might there be some type of bureaucratic hang up and we just can't get the keys to the rooms? What are students going to do? So we had the budget, on the one hand, a large amount of reserves in case of something happens, we don't get the dormitories. But then in the end, we could plow those monies back into different activities, taking care of more meals for the students and stuff like that. So we could build those in, but just being flexible in terms of stuff that we did down there. And then what else I think was interesting? Having a lot of sort of different activities in Brazil itself, exposing students to a lot of the different facilities and institutes at the university related to sustainable technologies, bringing in a lot of presenters for students to hear the different efforts of what's going on there, what's going on the policy side. So they were exposed not just to sort of the hardcore academic content, but it was a lot of type of experiences, lived experiences, engaging with everyone from the different institutes located in Brasilia, policymakers and others, and obviously cultural events on top of that. So I think that is also very important to build in to make it sort of a very balanced experience for those students. And then we did the same when we brought up students from Brazil. Because it wasn't just all lab work, it was a lot of different types of activities outside the classroom that they could get to experience life here and incorporate that into their into the experience here. And then lastly, we use as much money as possible from the grant itself to just focus on the students. I don't think we took any money from ourselves. We didn't take any salaries out. It was all directed, obviously, to take care of our cost of travel, but it was all directed for student travel and their necessities was part of this trip. So, and I'm happy to take any questions as well. And thanks for this opportunity to let me share my experience.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Flynn. With that, we have finished all of our formal presentations. So we'll go ahead and pass to the question and answer portion of this webinar. We've already received a couple of questions throughout, and now we also want to open it up to answer any of the questions that you may still have. So feel free to submit those via the Q&A chat box. That's the easiest way for us to be able to see those.
And Laura, I'm just going to jump in and say muchas gracias, muito obrigado to Dr. Flynn and Dr. Abbott. And Dr. Flynn and Dr. Abbott gave such great strategies and great tips, very, very practical, good tips about applying for the grant and designing the program and implementing the program. So thank you to Dr. Flynn and to Dr. Abbott. And if you want to share your contact information, Dr. Flynn, in the chat, please feel free to do so. We can't thank you enough.
Yes, thank you, Maggie, and agreed. So just to circle back to a question that was asked earlier by someone, if there's a list of eligible U.S. higher education institutions, the RFP does specify exactly which institutions, but as Maggie said, it's open to all legally registered U.S. universities, colleges, community colleges, technical schools, etc. here in the United States.
Laura, can I take the start? I see a cost sharing question.
Yes, they're asking about cost sharing implemented by Sinai institutions.
Well, I think the answer is the same, whether it's Sinai or the US, but Gustavo from Sinai might also have some ideas. But cost sharing can be many things. It can be, like Dr. Flynn said, faculty salaries or administrator salaries. It can be how your program might have to charge for things, but then your institutions can absorb the cost. Think about what Dr. Flynn said, which is to try to allow for as much of the grant to benefit the students and the faculty who are directly involved in the exchange program, which is not always easy, but it can be. So cost share means in kind, it means, or in especie, as they say in Spanish. It can be actual cash. It can be many different ways. It can be where students live, how they get their meals. There's lots of ways to do cost sharing. And other people might have another answer.
I think it could also be in materials. For example, we had other projects who were able to actually purchase the materials and use them for this project. So that could be also some kind of a cost share for this project.
Great point, Dr. Abbott, great point.
And I believe we did the same too in terms of the chemistry lab. Some of the inputs that were needed there, they're already on the shelf and available, but then we could list them as cost share too.
Great, thank you all so much. To Vitor, I will send the email, or excuse me, I see Gustavo is typing an answer to your question, which is great. Which is sending the contact information for Sinai.
Laura, can you drop into the chat box again the 100K, the join button for people?
Yes, of course.
And also, if Rita is still with us, which I think she is, if Rita can drop in also the Best Education USA Brazil website or contacts to help out. Okay, and Ariel Lopez de Silva has a question about cost sharing about Sinai. I think that is so that we are careful. You may want to contact the email that Gustavo shared so that you can double check some of your questions that are strictly related to Sinai.
Maggie, if I may, I think that's a question about James McLean about collaboration, regional collaboration. Yes. I think it's for example, for me, I was working in São Paulo and San Jose dos Campos. You actually have different institutions that could actually put a proposal together. So it could be 1 or 2 universities and 1 or 2 labs plus Sinai. So I think that's a kind of a way to do a bigger team with, a more like regional based team within Brazil as well.
Great, thank you. And I can go ahead and answer Daniel's question. He said, is the grant provided only for students, travel, et cetera? Or is it possible to include necessary tools, materials, softwares for the product development as educator and research expenses? Yes, it is. So we do encourage that a lot of the funds are used to cover student expenses. However, we do permit them to be spent on any other necessary items for the successful implementation of the grant. And we do have a little bit more information on that on our website, and I can provide some links to that as well. Gustavo, could I please ask you a question of clarification of if the technical institutes of Senai are eligible for this competition? That was a question that was asked earlier.
Okay, we have two kinds of institute here in Brazil, in Senai. One we call technological institute that is not available for this, is not eligible for this grant now. But we have 26 Innovation Institute, and each institute is focused on one technology, one area, specific area, and they can attend the whole country, each institute. Even is in the state of São Paulo, but the area of technology is related to a university in Pernambuco, in another state, we can do a partnership to apply the project.
Great, thank you.
About the contact, I'll be in charge of this program here in National Department of Senai. You can send an email to that address, partners.senai@senai.com.br. And myself and two colleagues will answer as soon as possible all kind of questions and doubts. Okay. And we can help with putting you in contact with the institute or the higher education schools here in Brazil. From Senai, for sure.
Great, thank you, Gustavo. That's very helpful. Well, since we're getting to the end, I'd like to ask everybody present, all of our panelists, for any final words, any pieces of advice that you may have for these potential applicants. Pandro, would you mind starting? Putting you on the spot.
I think it's very important to do the groundwork first. I think build the collaborations, build the network prior to getting the proposal done. I think that's very I think it worked for me, and I think I really appreciated that part of the work first. Just building a strong collaboration, having good colleagues in the on the ground, having the students ready from here to go to Brazil and from Brazil to come here. So I think that was really important for me. And you need to have some good research going on as well. So I think those two things had to be in place prior writing the proposal.
And then if I could add, it would be just, feel free to think outside the box. And also it looks like this is a recurring grant. So if you don't get approved this time, at least you started applying for the groundwork and establishing those networks and everything. And so think you could use those again when a grant comes up again.
Those are
That's
great
advice.
Yeah, great advice, Dr. Flynn and Dr. Abbott. Really great points. If Rita's still with us, I don't know if Rita or Leonardo from the embassy want to say anything. Final thoughts?
Just to let you know what Education USA is. We are the official U.S. State Department network that gives information about studying in the United States and helps U.S. universities and Brazilian universities connect. So feel free to use us if for anything, just introductions, connecting you to partners. I absolutely love these webinars because on the chat today, I made a lot of connections already. I already put many of our advisors contacting Senais. For those of you from Senai that were here, I know you heard from Sabrina from Caxias do Sul already, and connecting U.S. universities with Brazilian universities. So we hope, Maggie, that we do more of those, so that we can all have all these players connecting, and count on Education USA. educationusa.org.br. You can click on it. There is a plantão Education USA. You can talk to our advisors, both from US side and the Brazilian side. We'll be happy to connect you so that you can push for projects, and submit projects for 100,000 strong. Thank you, Maggie, Laura, and everybody.
Obrigada, Rita. Obrigada to you and your team. You do magic. You do Brazil USA magic.
Great.
And as far as us here at the embassy, we're very grateful to see everybody participating on these webinars. It's great to see all the connections being made. We've also helped a couple of connections between universities from Brazil and the US. Just feel free to reach out to us if you need to get connections, or to share any questions or thoughts about this competition round. I think it's a great program, and we hope to see a lot of good quality proposals when we get to the final review process. Thank you.
Obrigada, Leonardo. Thank you, Leo. You are a big part of this team effort. Leonardo is. So thank you. Obrigada, Leonardo, and Rita también.
Great. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and close out for the afternoon today. Thank you all so much for joining us. As I mentioned, this webinar was recorded, and we will send all the materials via email, and we'll also post them on our website within a couple of days and weeks. So thank you all so much. We look forward to receiving your proposals. We are here if you have any questions in the meantime, and have a wonderful afternoon.